Welcome back. The Roundtable in a moment, but first the DeSantis campaign. The Republican gubernatorial campaign got a major boost this week when he hired Susie Wiles as his chair, who only helped Donald Trump win Florida. And joining us right now is Ron DeSantis' pick for lieutenant governor, State Representative Jeanette Nunes, who is, by the way, the first Cuban-American woman to be chosen in Florida. We're going to be with her with a second. We're working out some technical issues there. But so why don't we get to our roundtable right now? And joining us is Zach Anderson from the Herald Tribune, Jack Brill, the vice chair of the Sarasota Republican Party, and Keith Fitzgerald, the former state representative. And Zach, let me start with you because they're almost from day one after the primary. Gillum has basically been leading in the polls, but the new poll came out today showing that the race is much closer, 45 to 44%, and some people are wondering if there is a Kavanaugh effect to this, that Republicans are getting energized because they don't like what's happening in Washington right now.
A number of the recent polls were done during the Kavanaugh hearings last week, and they're definitely, you hear from Republicans that they're angry at how Brett Kavanaugh was treated. They don't think that he was given due process here. This definitely seems to have motivated Republicans to some degree. I think it has also motivated Democrats who maybe don't think that Dr. Ford's allegations have been treated seriously enough, but it definitely looks like there was a national poll out recently. I think NPR with some other organizations did a poll that said the enthusiasm gap between Republicans and Democrats appears to have closed.
Chuck, is this what you've been waiting for, not under the ideal circumstances, but have you been looking for something to engage the Republican voter because the news over the last few weeks has been so bleak?
Well, and also you've got to realize that these are two candidates that came, out of the pack to win their primaries. So there's a lot to learn about, especially with Mayor Gillum. We're just learning and finding out what's happening out there. And so I think, this is just the beginning. The October surprise is yet to come. You never know. There's, you think about it, 36 out of 40 people being investigated by that FBI investigation in Tallahassee, they were all donors of his. So I think there's a lot more on both, to find
Jack,
out.
I'll ask this again, and I want to stay on the polls for a second, but since when do Republicans get concerned about FBI investigations?
Well, in this case, I'm very concerned about it. I want to make sure to see what's going on.
Keith, the flip side of this whole Kavanaugh effect is if Republicans are closing the enthusiasm gap right now, if Kavanaugh is confirmed to the high court, I would imagine that your Democratic voters are going to be quite perturbed.
The indications we've had so far is that the Democratic Party is more enthusiastic already than it's ever been in a midterm. So I'm not worried about that. And it's a mistake to pay any attention to one poll here or one poll there because they bounce around. The thing that is incredible to me is how excited young people are about Andrew Gillum across the state. They're volunteering, they're showing up. And if nothing else comes out of this, I think that that's a great thing because young people haven't had much positive to look at in politics for the last several years, and they're really enthusiastic about this young man.
Okay, let's try to join State Representative Jeanette Nunes, who is the pick of Ron DeSantis for Lieutenant Governor. Representative, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you for bearing with me with the technology challenge.
I appreciate it, and welcome to what we call the trapezoid around here. I want to ask you about a couple of issues, but first I want to talk about the campaign itself. As you may have heard when we led into this segment, we talked about your campaign hiring Susie Wiles to be the chair of the campaign, and as we all know, she helped Donald Trump win Florida. How much of a difference do you hope that makes? Because, we've been seeing stories over the last few weeks, including by Adam Smith of the Times, who labeled the DeSantis campaign wobbly, and that really changes needed to be made.
Well, certainly Susie is a welcome addition. She's a seasoned professional. She's someone that has a track record. We're excited to have her. And I think that obviously a lot of the rhetoric that's been out there, a lot of the media hoopla about the status of our campaign is just that. Our campaign is doing well. Ron and I are traveling the state. We're making sure that every Florida voter has a chance to hear our message, our vision, our platform for Florida, and we're excited about the opportunity. to continue moving forward.
Well, let's talk about that message and that platform right now, because one of the criticisms has been the lack of a concise, coherent platform. If you were to boil it down, what would that be in terms of what is the one single message you want voters here on the Suncoast to have?
Well, we certainly want Florida voters to recognize that Ron and I are the ticket that's going to protect Florida. It's going to keep Florida moving forward. We're going to keep our taxes low. We're going to keep our communities safe. We are going to make sure that we address the water quality issues and environmental issues that are so critical to the economy, but really to the lifeblood of our state. And we're going to make sure that we continue to push forward education. That's very important. As a mother of 3, I want to make sure that we continue to work hard on all these issues. I want to make sure that we continue to push Florida forward, because our opponent's track record, all of his policies are going to take us steps backwards. And we want to make sure that Florida voters, no matter where you are, we're going to continue to push forward. We're going to continue to put money in the pocket of hardworking Floridians, not in bureaucracy.
Let me ask you about one particular issue in education, which is always on the minds of Suncoast voters here. There are 2 different versions or visions of education here in Florida. As you know, Mayor Gillum is talking about raising corporate taxes to increase teacher pay to $50,000. Representative Gillum DeSantis has a quite different approach in terms of charter schools and so forth. Make the case why your vision of education, public education in Florida is better than what the Gillum campaign is talking about.
Well, the proof is in the pudding. If you look at where we are at as a state, if you look at education and all the strides we've made, if you look at the fact that we're now listed as the only state in the country that has made significant gains for our children, ultimately what Ron and I are committed to doing is ensuring that all of our children have the highest quality education. And whether that means that those students with special needs and disabled students that currently avail themselves of scholarships and take that money and go elsewhere because they found that those schools are a better fit for them, we want to make sure that parents are in control. Ron has been very clear. He wants to continue to make sure that our funding formula for our schools, that we're driving those dollars to the classroom. But ultimately, we're going to look at working out a way with the formula currently today, eliminating some of the bureaucracy, and make sure that our teachers are well compensated. And we believe that there's a way to do it to ensure quality, to ensure that parents are in control, but that also recognizes the important work that our teachers do for us day in and day out.
Let me ask you one more question, and I know that Representative Gillum has been on the Suncoast, gone to our beaches, seen the impact of red tide. Mayor Gillum has done the same thing here, but there's been a lot of criticism over the last couple of weeks of the Florida legislature and Governor Scott in terms of rolling back some of the environmental regulations that some people believe contributed to the severity of red tide. You're in the Florida legislature. What would you do differently in terms of trying to do whatever is possible governmentally to stop some of the issues that people believe are contributing to the severity of red tide?
Well, first of all, Ron has a proven track record. He's someone that's been talking about the environment, someone that has showed leadership. And as it relates to the Florida legislature, this year, under the leadership of President Negron and the legislative leaders, we put hundreds of millions of dollars towards repairing the dike, towards making sure that our beaches are protected, making sure that we're investing money in our springs and restoring our water quality. And so there's a lot that we've done over the past 2, 4, 6 years, but certainly we recognize that there's a lot yet to be done. And Ron is someone that on day one is going to work with the administration, someone that's going to make sure that the federal government is also meeting their ends of the bargain, because there has been comprehensive Everglades restoration projects in the books for years. And the federal government owes Florida a lot of money, and I can assure you that Ron DeSantis on day one is going to get that money flowing down to Florida to address not just red tide, but obviously the blue-green algae, which is a very big problem for our economy, for our health, for our well-being of our Florida residents. So we're excited about our environmental plan, and we're looking forward to working hard for every Florida.
Okay, Representative Nunez, thank you very much for joining us. Jeanette Nunez is the Lieutenant Governor candidate for Congressman Ron DeSantis. Our conversation on the race for governor continues. Welcome back, everyone. We are talking about the race for governor. This time you can't say the same old, same old. It's safe to say the Republican establishment on the Suncoast wanted Adam Putnam, but President Trump wanted Congressman Ron DeSantis and came here to endorse him, and that was enough for Republican voters. And as for Andrew Gillum wasn't leading in any of the Democratic polls during the primary, but he's been leading them in nearly every one since winning the nomination. And joining us for more are former State Representative Keith Fitzgerald, Jack Brill, the Vice Chair of the Sarasota Republican Party, and Zach Anderson, political editor of the Herald Tribune. And Keith, let me start with you. When you have a situation where Mayor Gillum has been leading in practically every poll since day one of the fall campaign, are you concerned about a perception that, well, we got this in the bag?
No, it's Florida. Florida is always close. It always closes. The last several statewide elections going back to the year 2000, have been close. And the Democrats are mobilized and fired up. There is no way they're going to let their foot off the gas pedal at this point.
But Jack, at least over the last 8 years, there was never an expectation going into the fall campaign, once you had the nominees from both parties, that the Democrats really had the leg up here. I know that it's taken a while for Congressman DeSantis to get his sea legs under him in terms of building this campaign structure, but what are your hopes in terms of basically overcoming what you're seeing in the polls right now?
Well, everyone's getting their sea legs, so to speak. You know, the campaign, I've seen a lot of action in the last several days. The plans are all in place. The absentee ballots went out yesterday. I'm looking at it was yesterday, I'm sorry. And, you know, so now the ground game here in Sarasota County, like everywhere else in the other 67 counties, are in action. I think you're going to see, I'm going to use Sarasota County, we as Republicans are going to come back with another 85 to 87% absentee ballot return, and that's not even our strong suit. Our strong suit for Sarasota County is election day voters. We always come out on election day, and that's giving the campaigns really a lot of good time to get the message out, change things around, so that DeSantis does go to victory.
Zach, what are you seeing on the ground? We keep on hearing about, you know, how Mayor Gillum is drawing huge crowds everywhere he goes. When Ron DeSantis comes to town, let's just keep it here on the Suncoast, are you seeing the same thing?
He had a pretty decent crowd. He was at Dolphin Aviation for a rally a little while back, and you know there was maybe around 100 people there. Gillum yesterday at the Siesta Key Beach Pavilion maybe had 50%, maybe almost twice that many people, 150 to 200 people. It does seem like Gillum, he's got a lot of true believers. You know, the Democrats for a long time didn't have candidates that really were really motivating to a lot of them. A lot of the progressive base didn't like some of the moderate candidates that the Democrats have put up. There are a lot of people are really fired up. It's hard to say whether this is, just the hardcore activists and they're really excited, or if this is crossing over to other folks.
Well, what's your sense of the DeSantis voter out there, the people who are coming out to his rallies? Are they passionate, or are they geeked about Congressman DeSantis?
You don't get he's not quite as energetic or charismatic. He's still a pretty strong speaker on the stump, so I don't know if it's quite as impassioned, but he definitely has a pretty strong core of supporters, and Republicans are motivated. They're motivated to defend President Trump. They're motivated by this Brett Kavanaugh and how they feel he's been treated. I don't think that there's a huge enthusiasm gap necessarily right now, although it does seem like the crowds are a little bit more amped up at the Gillum events.
And Keith, crowd side does not necessarily translate to victory on election day here, but compare this to the last two gubernatorial elections with Charlie Crist and Alex Sink before that in terms of where the Democratic voter is at.
Well, I'll tell you, I compare it to Charlie Crist, who's a friend of mine and a great guy, but Charlie really did not have a very rich policy agenda. Andrew Gillum is very specific about a broad range of policies. He has, the speaker you had on earlier, Nunez, talked about a lot of generalities. I could give you, half an hour show on any one of Gillum's proposals. So there's a great deal of substance, and it actually has united the party across the spectrum because there are a lot of pragmatic, solid, interesting, exciting policies. So it's a policy-centered campaign in addition to the charisma of the candidate.
All right, I want to pick up on that in a moment, but we are just getting warmed up. Our conversation on the race for governor will continue after a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about the race for governor, and joining us for more are former state representative Keith Fitzgerald, Jack Brill, the vice chair of the Sarasota Republican Party, and Zach Anderson, the political editor of the Herald Tribune. So, Jack, Keith was talking about the specificity of the Gillum campaign. Where is the DeSantis campaign in terms of coming out with a coherent, concise platform? Because most of what voters have heard from the DeSantis campaign is that Gillum is a socialist.
But there's also been a lot of specifics about the environment. There's been specifics about, continued job creation, keeping this economy going, keeping, the growth that we need. We need to have an economy, we've got another 6 million people coming to the state in the next 8-9 years. We need to have people here, and a lot of them are going to be 65 and above. We need people here that are going to be able to provide the services to take care of the population. You start taxing, corporations. You start adding, different taxes on different levels. That's going to cause the job creation to go down, so that our citizens, we won't have the opportunities to be, taken care of.
Keith, respond to that.
Well, first of all, everybody would say one of the biggest issues that we have here in the state of Florida will be health care. They don't have anything on health care, no plan, nothing. So your original comments were apt. There really hasn't been much in the way of specificity. And you can say you're for jobs, but what are you going to do about it? By the way, corporate tax increases are all on big corporations. Walmart's not leaving the state of Florida.
But it does affect small businesses, though, and that can really be very detrimental to.
But the proposal is not to tax
Zach,
small businesses.
These two gentlemen are actually talking about policy. Do you get any sense in terms of voters, are they looking in terms of policy details like that, or more of personality?
I think in modern politics, it's a lot more about personality. The voters sort of get the sense of where the parties stand on these policies. They've been, following politics. The positions haven't changed dramatically over the years. I do think some issues like red tide, which there's a bipartisan just angst about that. I think those are things that can sort of move people, and people want to hear what your views are on those. But for the most part, I think people are looking, do they like this person? Do they trust this person? Does this person, kind of come off as somebody who I can see in the office of governor? And so I think people are still kind of waiting to find out more about these candidates. They weren't that well known before they won their primaries.
Do you get any sense in terms of the coattails here? Because there was some discussion at the onset of this campaign that Andrew Gillum may be Bill Nelson's best friend in terms of his race for the U.S. Senate. What about all the state rep races, the congressional races down here? Are you seeing any kind of impact in terms of the governor races and the governor's race impact on these other races?
It's hard to really tell at this point, but one thing that's certain is that Andrew Gillum seems to be motivating more younger voters. You see it at some of his events. He seems to be motivating more minority voters. That could be a big benefit for the Democrats who have struggled to mobilize some of those voters. And also on the DeSantis side, he's really tied to Trump, the Trump voter who maybe doesn't pay attention. There's a lot of people, even on the Republican side, who probably don't pay as close attention to midterm elections, but if they think that DeSantis has Trump's back, maybe they're more motivated to vote in the midterms.
That raises an interesting question because, the perception is that President Trump really single-handedly helped DeSantis win this primary by coming down to Tampa, endorsing him, and that really moved the base here. But in the intervening weeks, DeSantis has angered President Trump by being critical of the president's response to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. Jack, is there an open question about whether the president is going to return to Florida this month before the election to help, do whatever he can for DeSantis?
Obviously, we don't know the schedule, but I'm sure if there's, a need and an opportunity, the president will come down and support Congressman DeSantis. I think that will be a very positive thing for the base, and it'll also show more of what we were talking about, more policies, more ideas, things that Congressman DeSantis has been working on, worked on in Congress, will work on as governor. The great thing, he'll be able to work with the legislature to continue to get things done. And, you've got to look at, you talk about the red tide. There's been a lot of things that have happened in a very positive. One example, Congressman Buchanan, $80 million in red tide funding, along with Congresswoman Kathy Kastner 10 years ago.
By the way,
we got another $2.5 million.
There are some indications that Moat has not seen that money.
But the new money, it was just approved, so it takes a little time to get it through. But even in the county, on the county level in Sarasota County, we were taken off in 2009 off of the water endangered list by the Department of Environmental Protection. We do so many things that have happened under Republican, time
red
in
tide
Sarasota.
is worse than we have seen.
Red
in decades.
tide is, but from a Sarasota County standpoint, I'll give you one example that helps with red tide. Our newest landfill, it's got a system that filters every drop of water before it hits down to Northport and Charlotte County. One of the things Representative Julio Gonzalez 3 years ago got $300,000 to help finish the sewer systems in Englewood. This stuff, it all takes time, and you look at the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been spent in the last 15 years by the legislature and locally to help this area.
All right, we have to take a quick break. We'll be back for final thoughts in a moment. Stay with us. And our guest joining us right now for final thoughts. So, Keith, I was asking Jack about do you really need Donald Trump to come down here and be on the stump for Ron DeSantis? The question is, who do the Democrats have to do the same? Because obviously, I don't know if Obama would have that kind of effect on the base for Gillum at this stage. Hillary coming to Miami in a couple of weeks, I don't know if that's going to do it.
Well, Andrew Gillum is such a charismatic figure. I think right now in Florida, he is much more popular than Hillary or Bernie. Obama, I think, would help, but he doesn't really need outside help to fire up the base. For one thing, he's just a phenomenally talented speaker, and I think he's going to get the African Americans in particular and young people, who are the very groups that drop off from a general election, presidential election, to a primary or to an off-year election. That's who Democrats lose, and that's who they need to fire up.
Jack, let me ask you if you're concerned about just that, because I mind you that Rick Scott beat Alex Sink 8 years ago by 60,000 votes.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you've got to look at is we're going to look at the polls in October. Let the two candidates debate. I don't know, they've got 3 or 4 debates scheduled.
I think 2.
2 right now? Okay, there's been talk of different ones. Then we can get into the policies. Then we can talk about facts, and then where they've got to face each other. And then I think you're going to see the true differences, and you really see where Andrew Gillum is, how far out there he is, in the positions that Congressman DeSantis is going to take that will keep the state going. That's where the difference, so to speak, the rubber meets the road.
Okay, 2 questions, Zach. Number 1, is Andrew Gillum that far out there in terms of where the Democratic Party is on these issues? And number 2, what are you looking at over the next 4 weeks in terms of indicators of where this is going to go?
Andrew Gillum is definitely on the very progressive wing of the party. Is he super outside the mainstream? I mean, a lot of people supported Bernie Sanders, and Andrew Gillum basically mirrors Bernie Sanders. So I think that he's, kind of on the outer edges of the mainstream, as is Ron DeSantis. He's very conservative, but he's on the outer edges of the mainstream. What I'm really looking at, I still believe that independent voters matter. Both of these candidates really fire up their base, and Republicans are going to come out for DeSantis. Democrats are motivated this year, and Gillum seems to be motivating them even more. But I'm really interested in independents. The candidate that wins independents in Florida tends to win the race. And Obama won independents. He won Florida in his two times that he ran for president. Trump won independents, and he won Florida. So we'll see who wins independents. I think that'll say a lot.
To be determined. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We want to thank our guests, former State Representative Keith Fitzgerald, Jack Brill, the Vice Chair of the Sarasota Republican Party, and Zach Anderson, political editor of the Herald Tribune.